Hey, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Have you ever been interviewed by an anthropomorphic frog before, or is this a first?
This must be a first, and I think this is probably a first for a lot of people who come on, right?
Well, actually, you have the benefit or the honor rather of being our very first guest for this new series. So it's a new
Oh my
segment that we're
goodness.
yeah. So congratulations.
Well,
It's a new
I'm honored
segment
to
that
be
we
the first frog guest or guest of the
exactly
frog.
guest of the frog. Maybe that could be the new name for the show.
Yeah,
Between two ferns, but between two frogs.
yeah, that's exactly right.
Speaking of ferns, you've got my horticulture beat by a mile. You've got like really nice plants behind you. I just have like, pictures of trees. So
Oh, thank
you
you.
win.
I have
You win
I
this
have
round,
I have like
Yitong.
25, 30 plants. I have a little plant map for people who come to house it when we travel. It's a lot.
This segment, the idea is to basically go back in time and go through some prop house success stories and do some little profiles on builders who have been involved with prop house, find a little bit about what they've built, what their experience was like with prop house, and do a little bit of a spotlight on the project itself that you built as a result of prop house. For starters, can you tell me a little bit about your own background professionally? I see on your bio on Twitter that you've worked for Coinbase and some other tech companies. What's your background?
In 2017, in the sort of the bull market, I was like super excited about Ethereum, bought my crypto kitty. I was like, that's it, I gotta go work at Coinbase. It's the only place for people who are kind of like building stuff and like wanted to work in person in SF and didn't want to be on the run from regulators.
Right.
And so I spent 4 years there, did a lot of different things, was primarily a designer, but also sometimes occasionally a PM, occasionally a builder and a coder, and
As with,
left early this year. What's
as
that?
with many startups, you often have to wear many hats, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I'm really grateful to actually be sort of like a little bit of a generalist. Can't say I'm the best designer, but I do a lot of everything. So that really helps when you're building stuff. So I left in February. Mostly have been working on Vector DAO. It's like I think that me and a couple of friends started almost like as like a casual thing, and it was just like a collective of our friends who were building, contributing in crypto, and we sort of like got together and formed this group chat, and it grew to like now 80 people. We've done like 30 projects with different crypto projects.
You must have read my mind. My next question was, how did you get involved with Nouns? So you beat me to it. Tell us a little bit about
Yeah,
that.
totally. So I got into nouns because I had first I met Jacob from Zora like a million years ago when we were both at Coinbase, and I was just like always looking around for like examples of really high functioning DAOs. And Jacob was like, dude, if you're not looking at nouns, like I don't know what you're doing, because that's the most functional DAO I've ever seen. It's the only DAO that functions. I was like, all right, Jacob, that's a little bit of a hot take, but let me go check this out. And
It's
I
kind
was floored, like the amount of building that was happening in nouns was shocking to me. It was way more effective than anything that I had seen lately.
what's the first time that you heard about Prop House? How did you hear about the Prop House initiative?
I heard about Prop House, I think, mostly in just like researching nouns. And then I later discovered that one of my friends was actually like the original designer on Prop House, which is really crazy. No, I was like, I think I was actually kind of floored by Prop House. Like when I saw it, I was like, wait a minute. At first, I was very confused. I was like, wait, we're throwing one ETH at like hundreds of people. Is this like working? And then you like, I was looking at it, I was like, wait, but that's exactly why this is working. Like throwing one ETH at a bunch of people
Yeah.
is actually genius. And it's
Mhm.
the first reaction that I had immediately
Can
is
you?
like, man, I wish I built this.
I've thought that many times myself. Can you expand on that a little bit, because I think that's an interesting point, which is that at first glance it seems foolish or silly to just say here's one ETH times 10, and permissionlessly we're going to give it out to these people. We won't even check to make sure you are who you say you are. We won't even check to check your references. Here's the ETH. It sounds crazy, but why do you think it works?
I think that's kind of how innovation works, right? It's I think people underappreciate how random innovation is. And so I think I see a lot of grants programs sort of in crypto that are kind of like, we're going to find the best people. It's going to be like we're operated by like a very experienced capital allocators who come from a venture background. And I think the only thing that matters is velocity, right? It's the velocity and the friction. And it's like I think prop house to me is very YC like, where it's like, look, we acknowledge that most people aren't that good at picking winners, so let's just pick a bunch of people really quickly, and then like fund them all, and then give them a little bit of something so they can do a proof of concept, and then we'll pick a winner when there's more data. And I think that's kind of like an acknowledgement of like it's a humble acknowledgement of like just how bad or how good people are at picking. And so I think that was like I think that was sort of like this sort of insight codified into sort of like a process and a mechanism. And I thought that was really smart. You know, I've actually tried to explain to a couple of my friends who are in DeFi how like DeFi projects should have prop house too, and they're kind of like, yeah, we don't really need 100 people coming in for one ETH. That only makes sense for nouns. And I'm like, guys, you don't understand that like 100 per people, one ETH each. That's not the point, right? The point is to fund people and lower the friction for people to develop MVPs and really test out concepts. Like the prop house, like getting prop house funding is almost never a goal in itself. It's sort of just like it's like an accelerant towards something that's much more interesting and ambitious. And so I think that's really great.
You had a prop 1023 for Agora, Nouns Delegate Marketplace, and it was a prop that you put in for actually our second mandates round. So a mandates round is basically where Prop House actually says this is something we're looking for. So rather than being an open call for any props that proliferate nouns or build a community, this was a very specific round that said we're looking for ways to improve nouns governance. And it was 5 prizes times 20 ETH. What made you want to apply with Agora?
Yeah, I mean, I have been actually noodling on something like a delegate marketplace for like a pretty long time, actually way before even the mandated round, and sort of having the mandated round come up was sort of like a great push for me to just do something. So I knew that I was trying to circulate buy-in for this thing, and then I at some point reached to Seneca, and he was like, hey, we're going to do a mandated round. You should just submit. And I was like, oh, that's perfect, right? It's kind of like there's already clearly almost like a request for proposals in this category. And I already had this idea. All I needed to do was actually really do like a concept. And so that's kind of a little bit of how we got into this round.
I think it's interesting to go back to sort of a more general approach of prop house as well. It's almost like a 1-2 punch now with the regular open rounds and then these bigger mandated rounds. You know what? It was actually Vape Ape, who was on one of our spaces, one of the founders of Nouns. And he said, you don't want to have everything as a mandate, because if everything's a mandate, then we don't get any surprises, And
yeah, you won't find out, like you mentioned earlier. Right? It's like having a mandate means you have an opinion about what is valuable, which I think like we ought to. But then I think that's exactly right what Vapeface said, where it's like, look, it's kind of innovation is random, and you want to always pave the path for people to surprise you and enable that. And so I think having both is exactly correct.
I'd love to hear too, though, that you were already building something similar to Agora, and then this was kind of the impetus for you to say, okay, let's buckle down and get it out, get a product out. So another point in the win column for Prop House in the terms of just incentivizing people to build things and ship things.
I often have this thought where it's like, man, like I think I probably could have gone directly on chain, gotten like funding for it, but. And it would have been, in theory, like a little faster, because I think eventually, after like a mandated prop house, all the things are so ambitious, you kind of have to seek on-chain funding to make it work. And then I think back on the other side, and I had this conversation with Noun 40 about it, is actually prop house is actually a really good opportunity to rally the community around what you're doing, right? Like it's almost like if whatever you're doing really needs the Noun community to get behind it, which I think most things that Nouns funds needs that kind of aspect, like doing the mandated prop house, like really engaging the community, like making everybody feel like they were there from the start and building things in public, walking through the full process. That's part of the work of building the product and building users for your product. And so I think it's like, even if you could go directly on chain, it might still be good to run through Prop House.
Yeah, and great for your reputation as well. Like I know that you've been building for Vector DAO and whatnot, but maybe a lot of folks in Nouns didn't know who you were as much as they do now after this prop round. So it sort of helps in that respect as well. helps to build an association with the community, and they say,
Yeah.
okay, I know Yitong. He built Agora.
Yeah, and I think I mean what frankly what you do for Prop House is super interesting, right? It's like there's no Toady for nouns on chain proposals. Funny enough, I mean I know you guys do some of it, but it's like there's much more active of a community and sort of like a community effort on Prop House that as a builder that you can piggyback on for whatever you're trying to build. Like we're doing right now, right? It's kind of like we're talking about it, and it's like it's good for Prop House, it's good for Agora. So this kind of stuff, like
Yeah,
you can't underestimate this stuff because I think it's actually huge. So just having that energy around this prop house is actually super helpful. This is it's like a classic saying in Silicon Valley, which is that first time founders care about products, second time founders care about distribution. And if it's
right.
like if you have experience building things, you know that building things is not the hard part. It's building something that deeply is valuable for people that they really want to use, and then getting in front of them and showing them how it works, right? And
Right.
I think just like that part is super big, and whatever can help with that is totally worth doing.
And in your case, especially because what you've built here has network effects, so it's more valuable the more people use it. So it's important to get it in front of people, and many of the people that you're targeting, nouners, and people who are very involved in the community that you'd like to write delegate statements, would be the same people that are
Yeah, and even Agora wouldn't even work, right, without the community being behind it. So it's like anybody could build a version of Agora without the community behind it. That's basically what Tally is. And so it just wouldn't make sense for us to do this any other way.
So tell us a little bit for those who are listening or watching and they don't know what Agora is. Can you give us the quick rundown on what Agora is?
Yeah, totally. So Agora is a delegate portal for Nouns. So what that means is that it's a place for people who have votes on Nouns to sort of declare what they're interested in funding, sort of write a little bit more of a profile about what they'd like to see, and more about them and how they think about how they're going to use their votes, so that they can sort of signal what they think is valuable to builders and sort of influence the DAO in certain directions before proposals even come on chain. So it's almost like it's a way for them to have impact, and before things go on chain. And then for builders, it's a great way to see in advance like who's interested in what, so that you can really try to figure out how to spend your time building whatever is the most valuable for the community. So that's very concretely what we're building first. But in the long run, we're just very excited about the problem and opportunity of delegation, which at the end of the day, when you think about it, is just how do we put more decision in the hands of people who are qualified and engaged and want to decide things. And the thing that I always think about is that not everybody wants to vote. And frankly, not everybody should vote because they don't want to put in the time. And that's okay. But there are tons of people who are genuinely interested in voting and voting well. And so
Mm-hmm.
how do we create a way for the votes to find themselves in the hands of the people who do want to do this and really have an interest in doing it well?
Because delegation may have some perks, I guess, and some advantages, but ultimately it's a responsibility that you're being delegated, and it can be a lot of work to stay on top of all the on-chain stuff, to vote on all the prop house, for example. You can easily spend 10 or more hours a week just staying on top of Nouns governance.
Oh yeah, easy. So I guess the even long term question is like there are always people who are deeply interested in doing this out of whatever a sense of protecting their token holdings, like just being genuinely interested. But how do we in the long run find like a mechanism for this to be sustainable, right? So that the best people who make the best decisions and who are really good at governing things tend to have a lot of opportunities. They could go do a lot of things. So how do we attract people who have tons of opportunity costs to come govern, and not only govern like they could govern anything, right? They could govern like Nouns, they could go govern Maker. How do we make
Yeah.
sure that Nouns is the most interesting thing that and most worthwhile thing for them to govern, and frankly the most effective thing, where for every ounce of effort that they spend, that they have the most impact.
So that makes perfect sense to me. So let me ask you, what do you see as the role for Agora to actually make that the case?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little hard to say right now. There's a lot of ideas that we're playing with, but I think Agora, I would view more of as like this is like just like a team and an effort that is interested in figuring this out and is committed to making it work. So things on our radar is sort of like in the very beginning, it's sort of getting a list of delegates up and having transparency around who's doing what or who's not doing what. And then for the people who are interested and engaged and qualified to govern, can we actually find them? Because today you can't even find these people. It's like, who are these people? I don't know. Like even if I have votes to delegates, I wouldn't know who to give it
All right. So by the time people are listening to this, might have been last week, but it was Thursday the 15th that you guys launched. How are things going so far?
Things are going pretty well. We had a little bit of a launch hiccup with multi-sig signing, but I think we're going to get on top of that. But things are looking good. We just sent out a beta for members of the community to try, and we were seeing some pretty positive stuff. I think we, at time of launch, had 7 members of the 7 nouners or 7 delegates who have written statements. That's representing, I think, more than 12% of all the total nouns. So if you come in now, in theory, you know, for a above quorum number of nouns, what people want to be doing. So that's really cool. We have had multiple builders in the community also put their hand up to become delegates. We have had 2 people actually get delegated nouns from Agora, which I think was superb. I think that was the whole goal in the first place. So I'm really excited about that.
So I guess there's 2 things that you guys need to do as a platform. One is to make sure the delegates know, or potential delegates know, that they can use the site to sort of give their statement or ask to be delegated to. And then there's nouners who are maybe not as active, and maybe that's the bigger challenge is nouners who are not as active to know that they have the option to delegate. Do you guys have a strategy for how to reach out to those nouners who, by definition of them being the most likely to benefit from delegating, might be the hardest to reach?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're working on a little bit of like a delegation drive plan that we're going to be implementing over the next couple of months. Also, we're part of that is thinking through, like, can we actually empower the community to help us with this, right? Can we create some kind of like a scavenger hunt, where like anybody who finds a inactive nouner and that convinces them to delegate something can get a little bit of like a reward.
One last question for you. Just wondering if you have any advice for anyone else who's thinking of doing a prop in any of the prop house houses. What would be your first piece of advice or best piece of advice to them?
Yeah. Well, this is advice given to me by CDT, and I think it was really phenomenal. Is that this is a pitch, right? And to make a pitch compelling, any sort of videos, GIF, screenshot, like concept art that you can put up is really helpful. I think it helps people really grasp really quickly what you're up to. And then the other thing is, I would actually reach out to people and just like ask for their feedback. Sometimes just putting up your proposal in is enough, but most of the time, I think getting members of the community to react, to engage, and get their feedback on stuff is super helpful. And so I would do both. Where
can people find out about Agora? Where can they go to check it out?
Yeah, so we're on nounsagora.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the same handle, Nouns Agora. Or you can always find me, and I will keep shilling Agora, probably pretty often. So I'm at ZHA Yitong on Twitter.
Well, thanks so much, Yitong, for taking the time to chat with me today. It's been really, really fun, and appreciate you answering some of the same questions you've answered on other appearances too. But it's just we want to be able to give the full picture to everyone who's listening. So,
of course, good communication is repetitive communication, as I've been told by many of my friends. So always down to repeat myself.